Connect phone is now set up and can make and receive basic calls, but our next step is to customize our feature keys to set them up for the way we want to use the phone.
We're already logged in as the admin, so we're going to go through the menu. We start out on the home page. The directory tab is where you can add contact information for people that you would want to have access to through the phone screen. You can add up to 100 names and up to 10 numbers per name through the directory. Feature key tab is where we set up all of our soft keys on the phone. There are 14 individual keys on the phone that can be configured to be anything you want. By default, we start with 2 intercom keys for calls between Connect phones, a Do Not Disturb button, and 3 phone lines at the bottom. We're going to add in the line that we set up, our home line, line 1, and add a name for it here in the paper label field, and we'll get to create our own paper label at the end of the process. We're only going to have that one line right now, so we're going to set the other 2 slots to unprogrammed, and we'll talk about VoIP accounts later in the setup process. Once we go through and add other phones to the system, we can add extensions as speed dials. There's no one set up right now, but we can add them in advance, and we know that we're 111, extension 111, we're going to add 112, so we'll add that in advance, and we know that's going to be Sue. When we put a plus sign in here, that drops us down a line in the display, as you'll see later. So we're going to put extension 112 for Sue. We'll add another speed dial extension for, we know John is going to be at 113 plus X 113, and I also want to put on John's cell phone, and we know his number is 1-555-555-555, all 5s. We're going to have it go out as a dial call, which is going to have it pick a landline or a SIP service, whatever it can get to first. John cell. That'll give us an outside number. We're going to update, and that'll just take a second for the phone to pick up those new settings. While we're here, we're going to go in and design our paper label. This takes us into another application where we get to preview and pick some colors for our label. We can also pick a template or create a new template for us to use in the future. So we'll look at the templates that exist right now, and we've got some grayscale options for if you don't have a color printer. The color is the one we start out with, and the aptly named Fruit Loops, which is a little softer. Once we've made one and saved one, a design, we'll see it as our last design. And we can also, if we are the admin, we can have our own template created and save that for the company as a template that can't get deleted or changed by anybody on their phones. Once we're happy with it, we'll generate the paper label, save this design. It's going to create a PDF. So we'll open that PDF. Here is the label we created based on our feature key settings that we've put into the tab, and the key here is when you do go to print, to make sure that you print with no page scaling. Any page scaling will change the size of your label and it won't fit exactly, so none of that, it should be set page scaling to none, and then you go ahead and print your label. Now that we've finished our feature key setup, we can take a look at the extensions tab. The extensions tab is where we're going to see our own name, that is phone 111. It shows us what we've set as our extension number, extension name, the sharing that we defined during the wizard. It's also where we manage our voicemail settings to turn on and off voicemail, to choose to store copies of the voicemail on the phone, and in this case we've chosen to send copies of our voicemail to our email account. We can change the delay time before we pick up with the voicemail greeting and the maximum time for each voicemail message. Back in the Extensions tab is also where we can add general extensions, which are numbers outside of the system, cell phones, customers, other contacts, home numbers, those kind of things would be added as general extensions can be dialed out of the system. We can add a group extension to allow more than one phone to ring at the same time. So if we had several phones set up, we could add the sales line and make this number 888. What we do then is we add in extensions. So we're going to add in our first extension, My Phone, and we're going to add in Sue at 112. Those two phones will then ring if anyone uses this extension, and we'll set it to local and remote. So any phone on the system could have a call routed to the sales team when someone goes into the auto attendant. We'll hit update to save that to our system, and we can see that the sales team is now set up. The phone lines tab is where we can configure and manage our phone lines that are connected to the system. Right now we have the single line set up for this phone. This is where we can see and manage the system settings for that phone line. We can turn the line on and off, add comments about where this phone line might be plugged in, which phone set it's physically plugged into, and we can set the sharing to allow users both local and remote to access the line. Local restricts it only to phones at the local area network, and private makes it effectively an inbound DID just for this phone only. On a private line, you are able to add another voicemail greeting just for that private line. That can be useful in a home office situation where the phone can be used for both the home voicemail greeting on the private line, and the phone extension itself can have a separate greeting played for any calls that come into that extension as part of an office system. The VoIP Accounts tab is where you manage any SIP services that you're going to use on the phone. The next tab is the System Settings. This is where you'll see the outgoing SMTP server used for our email when we're sending voicemail messages to email, our time server, our time zone, and the workgroup key that our system is using. Otherwise, there's not much to typically use in or adjust in the System Settings tab. The Media tab is where you can manage your ringtone and volume, although those two characteristics can also be managed directly from the phone. This is where you'll see your auto attendant settings for the auto attendant being turned on and the delay before pickup. Audio codecs are also defined here. Again, this is something you're likely not going to change in using the phone. It's set by default to use an efficient codec for calls outside your network over the WAN, and a higher quality codec 711 on the LAN where you have more bandwidth available for your calls. The final tab in the admin settings screen is user management. This is where you can change the password for either your user or your admin login. We're going to leave everything the same, so we're now going to finish up with the web administration session.